Greetings, guys. I know it's a little bit probably late for people on the East Coast. Um, wasn't going to do a really long one tonight, but just wanted to, um, get on, talk about a few things. And come on in. Welcome to Black Bear News, where we are discussing climate change, abrupt climate change, and things adjacent. Hello, Cindy Seeley. How you doing? I'm going to get my radio personality voice on. Hello, Cindy Seeley. How you doing? Welcome. CB Unglesby. What's up? How you doing? Speaking of Environmental Coffee House, I believe they're having their live chat tomorrow with Jennifer Hines. I think that's right. They usually do Friday nights? Or no? Or is it tonight? I might have my day screwed up. But I just saw Sandy posting something about they were going to do a chat. So I think it's tomorrow night. Do you have sound? Is the question. Sound. Yeah, I guess we have sound. I made sure to plug it in tonight. I always want to plug in my USB. Oh, and spit on the computer. That's what I want to do. How you doing, Poppy? Poppy Davis. Okay, so quickly, where is this? I wanted to kind of just jump into this one article about ocean currents. Climate change models predicted ocean currents would speed up, but not this soon. Ocean currents are the undersea conveyor belts that help regulate Earth's climate and influence weather systems around the world. Excuse me, this is one of those reports that kind of confuses me because one of the effects of climate change is that ocean currents or conveyor belts would slow down. But now they're saying that they would predict that they would speed up, and they're speeding up. What is it? Faster than expected. This is from yesterday. Ocean currents, undersea conveyor belts that help regulate Earth's climate and influence weather systems around the world have been speeding up over the past 2 decades as the planet warms, according to new research. The puzzling discovery, detailed in a study published last week in the journal Science Advances, highlights that climate change could have wide-ranging effects that are unexpected or severely understudied. Well, that's good to know. Climate models had predicted that ocean circulation would accelerate with unmitigated climate change, but that changes had not been expected until 2100, or they say much later this century, said a co-author of the study, Michael McFadden, a senior scientist at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. The disparity suggests that some climate models may underestimate the effects of global warming. Our primary tool for looking into the future about how greenhouse gas forcing will impact the climate system is these models, McFadden said. If we can't have confidence in their projections, it raises very serious concerns about how we prepare for a future world different from the one today. So, scientists admitting to confusion about what the actual effects of climate change might be. And that's fine. That's good. Let me see. Although faster currents were observed in 76% of the world's ocean waters, the most dramatic changes were seen in the tropics. There has been evidence that trade winds in the tropics have been strengthening over the past few decades, so we expected some response to that, said another co-author of the study, Janet Sprinthal, an oceanographer at the Scripps Institute. But the acceleration was happening at a faster pace than what wind alone could explain. Scientists have observed an increase in the intensity of surface winds, combined with a steady rise in greenhouse gas emissions since the 1990s, but McFadden said the exact links between increased greenhouse gases and faster ocean currents are still unknown. We're not 100% certain how all this is driven by climate change. I just actually read or heard something else about accelerating winds over the Arctic, or over the North Atlantic, excuse me, that the faster winds were driving ocean currents. I don't know if it's the same study or referencing the same study. It's possible that changes in the ocean could also alter precipitation patterns, the behavior of the jet stream, atmospheric circulation, etc., etc. Warmer water will generate hurricanes and extreme weather. We know this. Warming oceans are causing a mass migration because fish are moving to areas where they can thrive. We know this. When I hear about changes in current patterns, I'm interested in how this will affect the productivity and distribution of fisheries. Any major impacts on fisheries could have a cascading effect up and down the food chain, with impacts on countries and communities that depend on fishing. All right. More negative effects of climate change. And the upshot of that information is faster than expected. All right. How you doing all? People coming in. This isn't going to be a very long video, but just Forest Dweller says, if I laugh anymore, my ass will fall out. No, we don't want any of that happening, sir. So keep the ass tucked in. That's what I thought too. Azraika or Azraika, I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm messing up your name. I thought warming was going to shut down the AMOC. Exactly, I'm confused too. This kind of reminds me or makes me go back to a Paul Beckwith video that was a couple years ago. And he was saying there are these huge boulders on the northern coast of South America, northeastern, and they were confused about how these boulders got, because these boulders were like far inland, but there wasn't like, they didn't roll off a mountain or anything. They were just these huge boulders just like sticking out of the ground. And they were like, and they were wondering how they got there. And what they figured out was that there were huge, giant sea swells. At one time in the past, they linked it to a time when the Earth was warmer, to a hotter period in the Earth's climate, and so there were huge, gigantic waves in a southwesterly direction. Basically, they were so huge that they were bringing up huge boulders onto the land, and that's what they think was happening. So, It may be a case of the heat being the forcing element, would force, air patterns and wind and ocean currents and wave patterns and storms and et cetera to be more turbulent, I guess, which makes sense in my mind. Poppy Davis, climate chaos for show. Forest Dweller, Paul Beckwith has an excellent video about the cycles. Yeah. TCR Galaxy says that's from James Hansen book, the James Hansen book, the Boulders. Well, I don't know. I guess I don't know if Paul Beckwith was referencing the James Hansen book. I don't know. I just remember a video a few years ago he was talking about it. So, what I've been noticing, just, my own observations from the weather here, we've had really strong winds, especially this last winter, like a lot, we get strong winds, in this area maybe once a year, maybe twice a year, and it's kind of a rare occurrence. But over the past few months, we've had multiple nights, probably up to 5 nights, where it's been extra windy, which is unusual for this, this area or this climate. I don't know if anybody's experiencing that where they live, but and it makes me wonder when I see all these high wind events, and I'm like, is this a climate change thing, or is this just due to random weather patterns? I don't know. Thor Wootendahl says crazy updates in China. Well, okay, so I read. Let's talk about that real quick. Again, I'm not trying to do a really long one tonight, but we'll see. Where did it go? I read that the number of cases had actually fallen, excuse me. The number of cases had fallen, but the number of deaths had risen. And I don't know if anybody has got any different news about that. Said 2015 new cases had been reported, declining for a second day. So new cases, the amount of new cases are declining. Second day. But the deaths now exceed 1,100. What are you all hearing? I don't know. That's just what I'm getting from mainstream news. So that's Huffington Post. Red Llama, Void. How you doing, Void? You got the slow cooking frog phenomenon. We got Arctic 20 below zero right now. Poppy Davis says 60,000 infected, 1,300 dead. Okay. Just today by over... Wait a minute. So that sounds like 1,300 dead. So that was this morning when they said 1,100 dead. So I don't know. It went up. It went up by 13,000. Oh, that's a lot. So that's false, I guess. False news, fake news, however you want to put it. Right. Can't deal exactly. We measure global warming as watts. The story of heat is one of energy. Yeah, right. So, I would think more heat would bring more energy. And that seems fairly obvious. Um, 13,000 new cases. So I don't know. Hey, Groot, how you doing? Where are you guys getting this information? Where are you getting this information? Are you seeing is this like CNN or is this other news places? I'm just curious because if I get something from like an alternative source, like I don't necessarily, I give it full weight, but I don't. It's good to have like some kind of like cross confirmation, right? If I see it from a couple sources, then I'm like, oh, okay, well this might have some validity. It's things that come from one source, or one source and a bunch of papers are writing the same article about the same thing, aren't necessarily to be taken seriously. So I'm just wondering. Echoes of Not says one of the major airlines canceled flights to China through April. CB Unglesby, who Dr. Ryan? Okay. Well, that's yeah. I guess we can take that as pretty solid information. Groot says, how long have you had your own channel? Well, I've had this channel for 2 years. Give or take. I think that's right. Is that right? That might be wrong. I don't know. I can't remember. 2 years. So somebody complained, or that about in the live stream yesterday, and I'm not calling them out or anything. I'm just making a point. I don't care. You can complain if you want. Plenty of people complain in the comment section. It's totally fine. It's actually helpful if something is really like disturbing to people than I know to change my thing. But somebody complained that we were talking about politics for a long time before we got into any climate news. I mean, hey, there's always climate news. I happen to live in the United States. We have a really incredibly huge election coming up. There's a transformative candidate in the election. I'm a fan of the candidate, so I can't help it. I'm going to talk politics probably until November, and I apologize. I apologize for that in advance, but it's happening. So I don't know. Deal with it or don't. Whatever. Official update from China site. 60,000 cases, 1,369 deaths, 6,000 recovered as of today. As Rika says, I've been watching the quarantine cruise ships that aren't allowed to dock anywhere. Yeah, there's a couple, aren't there? Now there's 2. Is that right? More people keep getting sick on the cruise ship to Japan. If I was on that cruise ship in Japan, I would be like, how do I get off this thing? Get me the hell out of here. If I wasn't infected. Apology accepted. Cyrus Shadrezer, yeah. Yep. Just have to apologize. I'm going to talk about politics. Anyways, the thing I wanted to talk about tonight was this article, which I don't think I'm going to read the whole thing, but we can kind of get into it. And we already kind of know the answer, but it's just, I don't know, conversation point. This is from the New Yorker from February 3rd. So it's in the New Yorker, and they're discussing, can we have prosperity without growth? The critique of economic growth, once a fringe position, is gaining widespread attention in the face of the climate crisis. No duh. In 1930, the English economist John Maynard Keynes took a break from writing about the problems of the interwar economy and indulged a bit in a bit of futurology in an essay entitled Economic Possibilities for Our Grandchildren. He speculated by the year 2030, capital investment and technological progress would have raised living standards as much as 8-fold, creating a society so rich that people would work as little as 15 hours a week, devoting the rest of their time to leisure and other non-economic purposes. Yeah. He didn't foresee neoliberal economics coming in, striking a blow for the elites. As striving for greater affluence faded, he predicted the love of money as a possession will be recognized for what it is, somewhat disgusting morbidity. Okay. This transformation hasn't taken place yet, and most economic policymakers remain committed to maximizing the rate of economic growth. But Keynes' predictions weren't entirely off base. After a century in which GDP per person has gone up more than 6-fold in the United States, a vigorous debate has arisen about the feasibility and wisdom of creating and consuming ever more stuff year after year. On the left, increasing alarm about climate change and other environmental threats has given birth to the degrowth movement, which calls on advanced countries to embrace zero or even negative GDP growth. The faster we produce and consume goods, the more we damage the environment. That's just a straight up fact. That is a very simple cause and effect statement. Georgios Kallis, an ecological economist at the Autonomous University of Barcelona, writes in his manifesto, Degrowth, there is no way to both have your cake and eat it here. If humanity is not to destroy the planet's life support systems, the global economy should slow down. In Growth, from Microorganisms to Megacities, Václav Smil, a Czech-Canadian environmental scientist, complains that economists haven't grasped the synergistic functioning of civilization and the biosphere. yet they maintain a monopoly on supplying their physically impossible narratives of continuing growth that guide decisions made by national governments and companies. Once confined to the margins, the ecological critique of economic growth has gained widespread attention. At a United Nations Climate Change Summit in September, a teenage Swedish environmental activist, Greta Thunberg, declared, "We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?" The degrowth movement has its own academic journals and conferences. Some of its adherents favor dismantling the entirety of global capitalism, not just the fossil fuel industry. Others envisage post-growth capitalism, which production for profit would continue, but the economy would be reorganized along very different lines. In the influential book, Prosperity Without Growth, Foundations for the Economy of Tomorrow, Tim Jackson, a professor of sustainable development at the University of Surrey in England, calls on Western countries to shift their economies from mass market production to local services such as nursing, teaching, and handicrafts that could be less resource intensive. How about farming? Adding farming, nursing, teaching, handicrafts. Jackson doesn't underestimate the scale of the changes in social values as well as in production patterns that such a transformation would entail, but he sounds an optimistic note. People can flourish without endlessly accumulating more stuff. Another world is possible. Here. This is this is New Yorker, so it's super long. No time to read the whole thing. I was just reading something about emissions falling in the UK, so I'll pick it up with this paragraph. I was reading another paper, but for a time, official carbon emissions figures seem to support this argument. Something about, that you couldn't have carbon emissions falling and have prosperity go up or growth go up or whatever. Between 2000 and 2013, Britain's GDP grew by 27%, while emissions fell by 9%. Kate Raworth, an English economist and author, noted in her thought-provoking book, Donut Economics, 7 Ways to Think Like a 21st Century Economist, published in 2017, the pattern was similar in the United States. GDP up, emissions down. Globally, carbon emissions were flat between 2014 and 2016, according to figures from the International Energy Agency. Unfortunately, this trend didn't last. According to a recent report from the Global Carbon Project, carbon emissions worldwide have been edging up in each of the past 3 years. The pause in the rise of emissions may well have been the temporary product of a depressed economy. And maybe, depending on how bad the coronavirus thing gets, we may see this year, see emissions level off because so much is being, air travel and production is being, curtailed right now. But temporary product of a depressed economy, the Great Recession and its aftermath, and the shift from coal to natural gas, which can't be repeated, according to a recent report by the United Nations. And a number of climate research institutes, governments are planning to produce about 50% more fossil fuels by 2030 than would be consistent with a 2C pathway. And 120% more than would be consistent with a 1.5C pathway. Those were the targets established in the 2016 Paris Agreement. Yeah, green growth is likely to be a misguided objective, says Jason Hickel, an anthropologist at Goldsmiths, University of London. Can such alternative strategies be implemented without huge ruptures? For decades, economists have cautioned they can't. I'm going to link this article so y'all can read the whole thing. It's, fairly interesting. Some degrowth proponents say that distributional conflicts could be resolved through work sharing and income transfers. A decade ago, Peter Victor, an emeritus professor of environmental economics at York University in Toronto, built a computer model, since updated, to see what would happen to the Canadian economy under various scenarios. In a degrowth scenario, GDP per person was gradually reduced by roughly 50% over 30 years, but offsetting policies such as work sharing, redistributive income transfers, and adult education programs were also introduced, reporting his results in a 2011 paper. Victor wrote, there are very substantial reductions in unemployment, the human poverty index, and the debt to GDP ratio. Greenhouse gas emissions are reduced by nearly 80%. This reduction results from the decline in GDP and a very substantial carbon tax. Okay. This is important. More recently, Callis and other degrowthers have called for the introduction of a universal basic income, which would guarantee people some level of subsistence. Last year, when progressive Democrats unveiled their plan for a Green New Deal aiming to create zero-emission economy by 2050, it included a federal job guarantee. Some backers also advocate a universal basic income, which I'm totally for. Yet Green New Deal proponents appear to be in favor of green growth rather than degrowth. Some sponsors of the plan have even argued that it would eventually pay for itself through economic growth. There's another challenge for growth skeptics. How would they reduce global poverty? China and India lifted millions out of extreme deprivation by integrating their countries into the global capitalist economy. The process involved mass rural to urban migration, the proliferation of sweatshops, and environmental degradation. Yeah. I mean, they're basically doing what we did in the beginning of the last century, which is, destroy the environment, too quickly, industrialize, and it's a bad model. And then after they have some degree of prosperity, then they'll go, oh yeah, we should maybe do this differently. Maybe we should have some laws. Void says human manure compost. Jack Leroy says China might send workers back to their own farms to grow their own food, live off the land like they did before. So there's another way that we could actually do some kind of transition, I think. Echoes of Not said would love some basic income. I knew what you meant. UBI is a great idea, said no representation. Why allow companies to thrive with a shrinking employee base? The dude says rearranging deck chair on the Titanic asked the yeast in the bottle if they can have prosperity without growth. Answer, we can't not have growth. But humans are not yeast. That's the thing. Humans, sometimes have the capacity for self-regulation. They've shown the capacity for self-regulation. Can they do it on a massive scale? That has yet to be seen. Yeah, but depression. Okay, no representation says we can't have degrowth, guys. That's called a depression. But a depression is maybe something that's not necessarily invited or wanted. I think. Hey, is there an R in my eyes and the crinkles? What are you saying? The thing is, depression is something that is foisted upon people. No, thank you, depression. Degrowth, I think, is something that's more intentional, right? It's like, look, let's all, we know that we have to do this, and let's all prepare ourselves for living in a different style or different manner. And I think there are people that are already way down that road. Many of the viewers on this channel are way down that road of living in a different, in a different manner than most of society lives in. So, it's about getting more people to funnel into a different, style of living. I don't know. And this all, this really also has to do with the fact that economic collapse or societal collapse is not going to be pretty. It's going to be very, very painful. So why not choose some kind of partial collapse? Why not collapse things yourself? I guess kind of like maybe working back down the ladder from being, in debt, right? Lots of people do this. Lots of people have mountains of debt, and they see that it's a problem. They see where it's going. They see that they're about to teeter off the cliff of debt, right, into bankruptcy or into economic pain, and they take control of their finances and they walk back down the ladder. And it has to do with controlling yourself, right? And, not creating more debt, budgeting, living with less, right? That's how you get out of debt. I'm currently doing just that thing. I'm currently doing that exact thing. And, it takes some restraint, some economic and consumption restraint. But I, am also a person who is accustomed, and I have no problem with living with less. I buy very little. I shop very, very sparsely. I cook most of my food. I never eat out. Maybe a couple times a week, but so that's not never. Sorry, we'll retract that statement. But I hardly ever eat out. I mainly cook my own food. I try and use very, very little. The dude says, not that it can't be done in theory, we just won't as a whole. And for the most part, I agree with you. I'm not. Your point is a valid one. Humans en masse don't really control themselves very well. Also we've also had 100 years of being brainwashed with this idea of freedom of choice, in your consumption, with actual freedom or with happiness, right? So we've been programmed and conditioned to live this way. So what would happen if we were programmed and conditioned to live another way? It's there are forces of evil afoot controlling the masses to think and do the things that they do. If we had different inputs as far as information, and as far as like the possibilities for different kinds of living, then we could totally live a different way, and we could do that very quickly. Will it happen? As the dude said, not likely. Rich Diana says, collapse now, avoid the rush. What were you saying about my eyebrows, my forehead? You were saying something about my forehead having an R. I don't know if that's an R. John says, self-regulation, are you kidding? Peace. And there's been numerous, I guess you'd call them sci-fi books or books about the future, where there was some kind of calamity, a nuclear war, or, some major economic or societal collapse. And this has actually happened in the past as well. People saw the cause of the collapse and they were like, we're not going to go down that road again. And they totally shifted the way in which they lived, and they put in firewalls against, doing the things that led to that collapse. Forest Dweller says, my dog can snore louder than your dog. Booyah. My dog doesn't really snore. She's a very quiet sleeper. Tinker is asking if anyone knows of the name of the video of the climate change song that I sang last year, maybe 2 years ago. I don't even remember what that is. Poppy Davis says you have a furrowed brow, but it's okay. We all do here. No representation says I self-regulate all the time. I use electricity to watch Netflix or YouTube. I regulate if I eat 3 or more meals a day. I regulate lots of ways. Just nothing that helps our situation on the whole. Yeah, it's the possibilities for sane managed degrowth or a sane managed transition, to an economy or a lifestyle that does not destroy the planet, the prospects for that are very, very slim. The dude says, I see the R. The prospects are slim. The R stands for regulate. Slap Happy 813 says, we will begin to prosper when we don't focus on growth. When will human beings realize this? R for recycle? Sure. Reuse? Reduce. Salt Laker says, I brought my limo driver a Prius. And I was just thinking about, there are a lot of Teslas in LA. Like Teslas, everybody has a Tesla because it's like the cool thing right now. So, and it's just, it's, what was I thinking about it? Or I thought of a word for it. It's eco, fetishism or something. All these Teslas, are being driven around, and they're, even though they themselves are not creating emissions, they are creating waste. They're creating emissions where they are built. They're creating some emissions. They're creating, emissions in the shipping. They're, they're creating a lot of damage, and they're also creating this idea that if we are all cool enough and rich enough to go out and buy a Tesla, that we're saving the planet, bro. And you know what I'd like to see? More horses. More horses. And while everybody goes, huh? But, I'm for real. More horses or more bicycles. I love bicycles. Bicycles are great. Yeah, I know that you have to build them in a factory, but so what? There are billions and billions of bicycles on the planet already. We could probably construct bicycles for every human being on the planet right now, with the amount of bicycle parts that are on the planet right now. Dana Patterson says, "Who can afford a Tesla?" Well, they have an eco, not an eco model, they have like a plebe model. It's like 30 grand, with no extras, and so they have this like affordable model or whatever. 30 grand. I mean, the car I'm driving was like 24 grand used. I paid a lot of money for it. So, whatever. There's a bunch of people that are buying these affordable Teslas. Dana Patterson takes 7 barrels of oil just to make the tires. Indeed. That's what I'm saying. Irk1 says Teslas basically run on coal. Indeed, unless you have your own solar panel hooked up to a battery at your house. And again, all of those things require lots of destruction. Guys, I'm going to have to plug in my computer or else I'm going to lose you. Problem is that the plug is over here. Give me a sec. Uh-oh. Okay, doggy. Okay, doggo. Dogu. Oh, shoot. It's still not working. My bad, guys. Damn it. Help. My computer runs on coal. Sorry about that. I just didn't want to have my... Irk1 says I'm striving for a mule. Dana Patterson, I'll gladly ride a bike. Yeah, I have a bike, but the problem is I can never ride it because I'm busy driving my goddamn car. It's a really... Kent Deal says no Teslas in Cape Breton, too cold and mostly wilderness. Until they get that SUV Tesla going. Prudhone says a Tesla battery pack leaves behind 500,000 pounds of tailings from mining the minerals you need. Exactly. Human says local only. Stop all transportation. Elvis has left the building, but I have returned. Gary Rucker says Tesla Model 3 plus $35K. I got one and connected to my solar panels. It saves me a lot of money not buying gas. I mean that's the ideal setup, right? How much did it cost to get all the solar panels set up, or did you already have them hooked up to your house? I'm curious. I mean, I'd love to do all that, but it just sounds like, oh my God, I'm going to buy a Tesla. I'm going to buy, I want to get some solar panels anyway. But does it mean I really want to buy a Tesla? I don't know. I don't want to use gas, but then it's like the the trade-off of bringing a whole other car into the world and, the amount of gas that I'm not going to be buying. Oh, it's so hard. What is the is this this switch over to renewables, this green economy that everybody is heading straight into at full speed. And if people are rooting for Bernie Sanders, they're rooting for, doing that at even an even higher speed. Well, Poppy Davis, so Teslas use electric, which is generated by fossil fuels, makes no sense. But Gary Rucker just commented and said that he has a Tesla. He connects it to his solar panels. He charges his Tesla with solar panels. So no fossil fuels used in that particular maneuver. Although there were fossil fuels used in mining, probably a lot of the things that were used to make the car. Fossil fuels used in making the tires. Fossil fuels used in shipping the car. Let's go. Let me see. Gary Rucker says, I already have the solar panels installed. They cost $5K to install and set up. That's not bad. That is not bad. Oz Lefebvre says solar panels are not a good plan. I know because I did it. Why are they not a good plan? Explain. Electric cars are not sustainable either. I mean, conceivably, if the power went out, if you had solar panels and the power went out, you could still drive your car. If you had solar panels that hooked up, if you could hook up your car to your solar panels at home, and the power was dead, you would still have a car. Prudhone says you won't find Tesla cars or horses at Nazi saucer bases in Antarctica. No, you won't. And fish heads are never found drinking cappuccino in Italian restaurants with Oriental women. Yeah. Y'all remember that song? um, so what's the answer to true sustainability? Um, could we have some kind of magic combination of lowering the population, lowering energy use, lowering consumption? Could we do this all without having some kind of like overarching top-down decree from the governments of the world saying like you must live this way? Could we do this willingly and by our own locomotion? Obviously, again, the answer is Magic 8 Ball says not likely, but Slap Happy says I feel a bunch of flat earthers in here. No representation, says Kevin. Recall the article from about a month ago about mining the planet to death if the world goes green energy. Yeah, indeed. I mean, it's like, I feel like getting solar panels is awesome. I feel like getting a Tesla would be awesome, but I also feel like it's really like a vanity thing. It's like, look at me, look how green I am. I bought these things to, and no disrespect to the people that have Teslas and solar panels. No disrespect. I understand you're doing your part and you're trying. However, a true path towards degrowth would look something like living extremely minimally in a very small house, living with as little as possible, driving as little as possible, farming your own food. Again, I'm going to go back to the example of the Amish. It would look something like the Amish. Not exactly like that, but a variant of the Amish. People would be riding bicycles. People would be riding horses. People would be walking, running, etc. Maybe we have, some solar panels here and there, but I mean, very little in the way of technology. Groot asks, have you ever posted your lyrics to your music on your channel? Sometimes I do. As I said, I'm excuse me. Yeah. As I said, I am releasing this album on climate change in a couple months, and I'm working furiously on it. That's why my videos have been a little intermittent. But anyways, when the album comes out, I'll have it fully posted with all the lyrics and everything, and you guys can check it out. D Ranch says the answer is anything done against nature has to stop. We have to stop. Sorry. And I agree with you on that. That's, in a very root, basic way, that's my understanding of what needs to happen, is that we need to about face from our lifestyles. We need to, get off grid as much as we possibly can and leave this current society to its own devices, really. Funky Mystic, relocalize, exactly. Marin Angeli says, can't we all just get altruistic? Well, that's what it would take, right? Mass altruism. What are you, part of that cult? What are you in those one of those climate changers? Are you one of those Extinction Rebellion cult people? What are you guys, altruists? You have a good point. It says too much dairy. Yeah, sorry about that. You are right. Black Bear News, like the Amish. Yeah, I mean, think about how the Amish live. I'm not anywhere near doing that. I'm trying to inch my way closer. It's really difficult because I'm super stuck in the system right now. Until I'm trying to make some changes, but it takes like all kinds of work in the background to get to a point where I can go, okay, now I can make some large steps in this direction. But at the moment, I'm just like extremely trapped. Like this is my outlet right here, this channel. My outlet for imagining a better world, or imagining a world in which we actually do something realistic about climate change. Gary Rucker says put a greenhouse in the backyard, do vertical hydroponics. That is actually my next step, because it's really hard to grow food here, because whatever is happening with the and just like that, I think I've gone like 15 minutes on this video. Whatever's happening with the UV rays, particularly where I live, is not good. The combination of heat and high UV and whatever else is going on makes it really difficult to grow food here. It's too hot. Like my plants get all burnt, so I have to shade my plants if I'm growing in the summer, and in the winter has kind of been all over the place as far as weather goes. So still difficult to plant things in the winter. Excuse me. So I'm thinking about a greenhouse or some type of something like that. That is a great idea. I have a space where I could build a greenhouse and grow things. And that would be helpful. Cultural reprogramming, indeed. Irk 1, the power of fungi. The dude sure sounds good. It does, doesn't it? It sounds really just, just thought-provoking, just high, all these high intentions, that we're all aspiring to. No representation said, Kevin, if we followed your advice and went off-grid, we wouldn't be able to contact you. This channel would die. Not necessarily. There are lots of people that live off-grid that actually tune into this channel quite often. They have, they're not, obviously they have Wi-Fi or they have a connection somewhere, but they're basically, off-grid for the most part. But they still are connected to the internet. So there you go. We could mainly, we could all be, I'm actually a proponent of that. I think the internet is, will be really instrumental and will be really necessary in actually making this change happen, because we're not going to be able to, you're not going to be able to like one-on-one, door-to-door, meet and greet people into like figuring out that this is what we need to do. You're going to have to spread this message with the internet. This is the only way that enough people are going to figure it out all at the same time. Oh, this is how we should do it. It's not going to happen without the internet. I just don't even see it. So I would say live like the Amish, but like keep the internet or somehow keep the internet going. Or at least keep your internet contact, right? Live 80 or 90% off grid, but have at least the ability to connect with people on the internet and have access to the knowledge that it brings. You have a good point, says you can live off potatoes, cabbage, onions, and beans. Indeed. Indeed you can. Guys, I'm going to have to wrap this up because I'm hitting about an hour. And I was trying to keep this at about a half an hour. So I've gone way past. But I just want to, I want to have a discussion with y'all about this. It's a discussion that we've had before. And one that we will have again. But it's kind of all part of the process of realigning ourselves or realigning the content of human thought into hopefully a productive area of like what's really necessary in making these changes. Kent Deal says winter camping is so much fun. Indeed. But you know, you don't got to live where you got to live. Although I'm sure it's a nice, beautiful place. I mean, if there weren't 6 million people here, this would be like a perfect place to to camp out and grow some food. There's 6 million people here, though, or more. No representation says, but we'd lose internet if we all did that. No satellites would work if we lose civilization and regrowth of planet. Not necessarily. I mean, you could. I think you can figure out a way to keep it going. You know, even the way the internet works now doesn't need to. It doesn't need to stay the same. And we could use the basic structure of it. You know, cables and whatnot. It doesn't necessarily need to use satellites. You know, we could have something like an intranet, you know, where we have clusters of internet, you know, clusters of internet that connect with other internets, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, yeah, how do you get across oceans? Yeah, that's another problem. You're right. You know, that technology runs smack up against climate change every time. Microsoft Word technical support says you don't have to sacrifice knowledge or even that much tech, just consumer capitalism. And there you go. I mean, what if our technology was intended to last or to be, you know, we can cannibalize all of the things we use and like remake. You know, we could work on our own computers, our own phones. Phones don't have to be renewed every 5 years or, you know, re-upped. We could have the basic structure of the things that we use right now and perfectly usable, right? It's like, you know, the quality of technology we have right now is perfectly usable for these kinds of connections that we're making right now. Where else could we go from here? I'm sure everybody's sitting in a room somewhere trying to think of the next place we can go, but you know, we have enough to work with right now. We have more than enough to work with. Can the insect apocalypse be the next topic? Sure. What, you know, it could be the or one of the next topics. The dog wants a walk. That's exactly what she wants. You're right. So with that being said, I'm gonna sign off, you guys. Thank you for being here. I appreciate your presence in this discussion, and I will hopefully see you tomorrow. Don't know what time, but I'll see you when I see you. Peace out.